whether it's done consciously or not, life comes in with the big broom or the big plow and just rips up anything that's not true, or anything that's not that you don't need for your growth in consciousness. Hello friend, John Dalton here, Further Emergence podcast, where we go into love, consciousness and the mystery. And in this episode we're going into the isolation of the spiritual life, appreciating the little things, celebrating life, and the power of change. Okay, well the first thing is a quote from Kierkegaard. There's a few things here, so let me just read the quote. He says, being too busy has this result that an individual very, very rarely is permitted to form a heart. On the other hand, the thinker, the poet, or the religious personality who actually has formed his heart will never be popular. Not because he's difficult, but because it demands quiet and prolonged working with oneself and intimate knowledge of oneself, as well as a certain isolation. So that was the meme, and then somebody made this comment. They said, if you explore this in one of your podcasts, I'll be curious to hear about your take on how much the poet, artist, spiritual person wrestles with this unpopularity and when it stops mattering to them, in brackets, or if it ever does. And that coincided with a letter somebody wrote me where they said, hi John, I had a quick question for you. The past few months I've struggled with interacting with others. I've perceived disgust and annoyance from most of the people around me, whether that be going to the shops, restaurants, or even just walks, giving me odd glances and crossing the other side of the street to avoid me. Now, for some odd reason, people are flocking towards me. I have people asking me for my number, striking random conversations, staring at me awkwardly smiling, and looking towards me like I'm a leader. It's a bit tiresome, actually. People are sticking to me like glue. Nothing feels like it's changed much internally for this to be presenting in reality. I was curious if you had any idea if this is a good sign, something I should watch out for, or just ignore entirely and continue on as usual. So this is all goes towards this thing of like the spiritual life, and what do you do in the spiritual life? How do you interact with people? And it's common. It's very common, and it's not really anybody's. It's not really anything you can gauge or monitor, because it's kind of a wild ride, the spiritual life. There isn't really much. There's nothing set, you know. As soon as something is set, it gets changed, and there really isn't anything you can do about that, which is kind of built into the whole spiritual life thing, because part of it is a process of surrender, where you just kind of have to go along with whatever happens. Not in a passive kind of way, but your focus is being attuned to the movement of the mystery. And it's a wild ride. So like the person in the letter said, one week everyone loves you. Or no, it was the other way around, wasn't it? One week everyone's crossing the street trying to avoid you, and the next week everyone's all over you. And it'll probably go back to the people crossing the street the following week. That's kind of the way it goes. We go through periods, go through changes of this is the way things are, and then it changes, and then they're a different way. The feeling of isolation and loneliness and being on your own, well, it's not like you can go, oh, I'm finding the spiritual life is really damaging my social life. So I think I'll just stop. Maybe you can. I haven't found that to be possible though. I haven't found it to be something that you can just pick up and put down again when, you know, it suits you. It seems to consume people. They can't get away from it. And in a way, there's a feeling of choice, but there isn't really a choice. Not really. You can't really do anything about it. Because if you're drawn to consciousness, if you're drawn to the spiritual life, well, that's it. that's just the way it is. It's not like you can get away from that. Now that can feel a bit like a curse, because it separates you. You know, the standard kind of life, whatever that is in your culture, it's not really available to you. You are an outsider, or you can feel like an outsider to that. But there are upsides to that. Because the sort of things that other people have to deal with in their lives, you don't have to, don't necessarily apply to you. So you can, like for example, people who are interested in the spiritual life, it's much easier for them to do manifestation, to get a handle on manifestation, because they're already primed for it, because they don't believe the illusion of existence so as much as people who are living, in quotes, a normal life. I think it's useful to recognize that you're different, that you see things, the things that you're concerned about, other people are maybe not concerned about, and to find your solace, find your company, find your tribe in other ways, which is great. Like, that's why the internet is great. Because it used to be like, if you were the only person in the village who was interested in consciousness, that was a pretty lonely life. You really just had to get your relationship with the mystery. That was it. It was just you and the mystery. Because unless you were going to travel, and a lot of people did, that's what a lot of pilgrimages were about, you're not really going to be able to talk to another person about the sorts of things that you want to talk about. Whereas now on the internet, you can find people, you can find like-minded people. You can find all sorts of groups and courses and books and people on YouTube walking on beaches to help you with that sense of feeling isolated. Like it's a regular comment I get on YouTube of people going, "Oh, it's so great to hear you talking about these things that I've been thinking about." So in terms of isolation, you may go through periods of being isolated, and then you may go through periods of being very deeply involved with other people and be constantly around other people. And I think, like anything in the spiritual life, once you don't get attached to any of it, then it just comes and it goes. I've had both. I've had periods in my life when I've been very engaged with people, lots of people around, very busy. And then I've had periods of intense isolation. So it doesn't necessarily follow that, oh well, I'm interested in consciousness, there goes my social life, there goes my friends, there goes my family. No, it doesn't necessarily follow. Similarly, if everybody is crossing the street you've got to look at the feedback. You've got to, there's like that old joke, if one person tells you an idiot, they are probably an idiot. if three people tell you an idiot, yeah, maybe you're an idiot. That's a bit harsh, but it's the thing of taking the feedback, but not taking it too seriously, not becoming don't use the feedback to kind of add to this feeling of there's something wrong with you. There isn't, but you may go through periods of different things. A lot of it has to do with frequency and resonance, and just what your frequency is. Because sometimes your frequency will be discordant with the frequency of other people, and sometimes it'll be lovely. They'll just love hanging around with you. So yeah, I wouldn't read too much into it, just take note of it and take the feedback. But other than that, I would just keep going with what you're interested in, or what shape your spiritual life takes. I mean, that's hard enough on its own, without sort of having to worry about what other people are thinking of you. You know, that's that's like just going to be hard. That's just hard work, you know. So yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned about that. And yeah, don't be attached to the idea of being solitary. You may not be, or you may be for a while. And kind of trust in that the mystery kind of knows what it's doing, you know. And if you're finding yourself being very solitary, then you know that's what needs to happen for now, not forever, just for now. And it'll probably change. It'll probably become something else, and to be okay with that. Now let's have a look at some of the other memes on the Further Emergence Instagram feed. The next one says, I hope you understand how much our little talks mean to me. We totally miss the importance of the little things that we do. We think we just texted somebody to say, I was thinking about you, you popped into my mind. How's it going? Are you okay? We think that's a little thing. But it's not a little thing to the other person. It's a very big thing. And holding the door for somebody, smiling at people, even the people who don't smile back. And in some cases it often feels like, especially the people that don't smile back, we think, oh, what's the point? Well, what sort of an idiot am I, smiling my face off at everybody? Well, why am I the one who always gets in touch with that person? You know, and they never contact me back. Or, you know, I'm always cheerful. I always like trying to see the good side in everything. Well, what's the point? Like, it doesn't make any difference. Or, you know, when I ring up that person and say, you know, how are you going? Or when I say, oh, let's have a cup of tea, let's catch up. Like, does it make any difference? Does it matter? It matters a lot. And this idea of, you know, somebody saying to you, you know, our little chats, they mean so much to me. That's really good to remember it, because it's so easy to sort of feel like these things that we do, they don't mean anything. They're insignificant. And they're not insignificant. They mean so much. And it's so important to do them, but they're so small. They're just little. We just sort of think, oh, it's just a little thing. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't mean anything. Anybody would have done that. The thing is, anybody didn't do it. You did it. And to not get, you know, bogged down with the not seeing the results. Like, people talk about faith, you know, like faith in God and all that kind of thing. I've never been a big fan of that, of just belief. I kind of think, well, can't I experience it directly? Why do I have to believe in something? But this, I think what you do need faith for is for this kind of stuff. That doing these little things, because you can't see the result. You can't see the effect that it's having on the person. And you really just have to go on faith that there's a point to it. I mean, if you can pull back from it enough, you can kind of see, well, I actually enjoy doing it. It's just part of my nature to get in touch with people and to find out how they're going, to be concerned. It actually, I'm doing it because it makes me feel good. I mean, that's good to be that honest with yourself. But to not kind of go, it's pointless. It's not having any effect, you know. It absolutely is having an effect. And that's kind of where this thing of faith comes in. Like, it's just kind of knowing, yeah, it is. I mightn't see it. I might not be able to see the tangible results of these little kindnesses that I do, but they're so important and they do make a difference. They make such a difference to people. And I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep doing it even though I can't see anything to encourage me to do it. When you do it from that place, it's weird. You actually do get a lot of encouragement, a lot more encouragement than you think. Whereas when you're kind of going, okay, when you're playing tennis with the person inside, going, I'm going to ring you, now you have to ring me. I'm not ringing you back unless you ring me. It doesn't. You don't enjoy it as much because you're waiting for some kind of feedback, which never comes. The next one is by Terry Tempest Williams, and it says, once upon a time there was the simple understanding that to sing at dawn and to sing at dusk was to heal the world through joy. The birds still remember what we have forgotten, that the world is meant to be celebrated. The birds remember what we have forgotten, that the world is meant to be celebrated. That's beautiful, isn't it? I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a lovely way of thinking about it. Because, yeah, we could kind of go, yeah, the world is to be celebrated. And in one way that is true, but then it can be hard, can't it? I mean, if you're tromping around in nature like I am, that's easy, isn't it? It's easy to kind of say, well, this is fantastic, isn't it? That's why people go on holidays. To get out into nature and to, you know, just really enjoy it. That's kind of easy. But then, what about poverty? What about war? What about cruelty? What about all the awful things that go on? What are we supposed to do about them? They're not so easy to celebrate. It's much easier to kind of be selective and kind of go, yeah, I think I'm only going to celebrate the things I like, the nice things, the fluffy things, the things I understand, the things I can relate to. And I'm going to make everything else wrong. And you could go, well, it is wrong, isn't it? Like cruelty, violence, they're all wrong, aren't they? And yes, in a way, but then if you really kind of come into that what we're in is a place of opposites, of duality, and that the mystery is beyond that. And that's not to kind of spiritual bypass it and go, oh, it doesn't exist or it's not real. It's very real. But it's to not, as soon as you make something wrong, or as soon as you make something right, you make the other thing wrong, when you can kind of see the totality of it all. And to do what your heart moves you towards, you'll generally find it moves you towards loveliness and kindness and sweetness, and because that's your nature. That's who you are on the inside. That's who we all are. And if you can kind of sit into that and let go of all the rights and the wrongs and the black and whites and the up and the down and all of that, and kind of go, that's all part of it. Now let me go beyond that. Let me go deeper. Let me go into the deeper reality behind that. Let me sit there and see it all for what it is. This play of good and evil and right and wrong and light and dark. Let me celebrate the whole thing. Let me celebrate the craziness of it all, the melodramaticness of it all. We kind of have a sense of this anyway, because, you know, what do we watch for entertainment? We watch drama. You know, we don't. The reason the story ends at happily ever after is because we're not that interested in happily ever after. We want the drama. We want the conflict. We want the having to get over the odds and all that kind of thing. That's what we want. And it's kind of the same with existence and our lives. We can kind of go, we can celebrate the drama of it all and the majesty of it all, which is not to take away from it, take away from your own, like your heartbreak and when things don't go the way you want and all of that and how difficult it is. But there is a way of kind of being okay with it, being okay with it because you kind of understand how it fits together and how it all disappears every night anyway, and it doesn't bother us. We think it's going to bother us. You know, when we think about death and no longer being here, we think that's a new thing. That'll be a new experience, and maybe it will be. I haven't died that I can remember, so I don't know. But the idea of like the worst kind of possible scenario, where it all just ends and there is no more of anything. We do that every night. And the only reason it doesn't bother us is because we have this kind of idea that, well, I'll be back in the morning. You know, I'm not going for good, I'm just going for a little rest. That's what we think. That's what we think is happening, and that's what helps us, you know, not clutch onto the bed sheets going, I can't go to sleep, I can't let it all go. How we're okay with it all. So it's easy to kind of, you think about the birds and you go, oh, let me celebrate like the birds. You let me get up in the morning and sing about all the great stuff. But that's inherently, or built into that, it's problematic because it means that you're not celebrating the whole of it, the totality of existence, of this amazing kind of thing that we wake up into every morning. And we kind of go, we kind of miss it. We miss how amazing it is because it's so compelling. We just get into the drama of it and like, oh, I wish this thing wasn't the way it is. I wish this other thing wasn't the way it is. But in the same way, like that people, you know, run into their house to watch Game of Thrones, you know. And when you pull back from that and go, what? It's so gory. Everyone's so kind of nasty. Even the good people end up getting corrupted. And it's, you know, why would you want to rush home to see that? Why would you be excited about that? In a weird way, that's celebrating the totality, the drama of the whole thing. And I think it's great to do that with life. And that's not to say you're like, yay, look at all that violence, look at all that cruelty. I don't mean that. But, to honor your heart, what you're drawn to, what you love and what comes out of you, to honor all of that, but also to celebrate this amazing thing that we wake up into every day. That's brilliant and to be celebrated. And the last one says, everything has changed and yet I am more me than I've ever been. If you've gone through a big change, this will really resonate with you, that everything changed and yet you're more yourself than you ever thought possible or you ever knew you could be. Why is that? Why is it that we can go through big changes? You know, we can change countries, we can change jobs, we can change partners, we can be unrecognizable to ourselves and to other people. And yet we can feel like we are more ourselves than we've ever been in our lives. And that kind of, it's really about the way things accumulate on us, you know. We're a bit like stones, you know, and we do gather moss. But it's not the green stuff, it's the moss of familiarity. It's the cliche of the first time you drive to your house, you notice everything. You notice the shops, you notice the trees, you notice the turns in the road, you notice everything. But if you've lived in the same place for 20 years, you don't notice so much. Because we become familiar. And it's the same with ourselves. We get used to the way we are, or the way we think we are. And then, whether it's done consciously or not, life comes in with the big broom or the big plow and just rips up anything that's not true, or anything that's not, that you don't need for your growth in consciousness. It just gets rid of it. It's ruthless. It's terrifying. You know, particularly if you're very happy. You've got a happy little house, a happy little partner, happy whatever, and you're interested in the spiritual life, there's always the possibility that life will just come in and remove things. I mean, that happens to people anyway, and often it's the removal, the shocking removal of things that acts as a catalyst to begin the process of change. But if you are conscious of it, then you kind of know things can change. Things can change in a heartbeat. But the upside of that is when things are removed, you can get to see yourself anew. And you get to see new parts of yourself, because under the protection of the familiar, we grow. Growth happens. And when we grow, and when it's removed, then we see how much we've grown underneath that. And it's beautiful. So this is the sort of statement that's made by someone who's gone through the big change. And they go, everything's different. I'm in a different country. I've had this myself. I've been, you know, almost overnight, I went to a different country, and it was a whole different setup. Very disorienting. But I grew into it, and I grew into seeing different parts of myself, and that's happened to me a good few times. They call it, what do they call it? Shamanic death. I've heard it called that as well. And it's just where different parts of you die away. But when they do that, you get new growth, and that's beautiful. All right, well, that's all I have for you this time. I trust you're well. I trust you're of good cheer, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.